I had exactly $1.9 million sitting in an account I had never touched, and the first thing I did with it was pretend my car broke down on the side of the highway. My name is Emma. I am 30 years old, and I am a licensed physical therapist. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something about my family. Growing up, I was not the problem child. Not technically. I showed up to things. I got decent grades. I never embarrassed anyone at a dinner party. But I was never Caleb, my older brother, who could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. I was just Emma, the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who would eventually figure things out on her own because, as my mother liked to say, I was built different. She meant it as a compliment. It never felt like one. My Uncle Richard died 14 months before this story begins. He never married and never had children. He was my father's younger brother, and after my father passed when I was 11, Uncle Richard became the closest thing I had to a steady, unconditional presence in my life. He drove 3 hours to watch me graduate from physical therapy school. He sent birthday cards with actual handwritten notes inside them, not just his name. He was, by every measure that actually matters, my family. What I did not know until his estate attorney contacted me was that Uncle Richard had been quietly investing for decades. He had a financial advisor nobody knew about, a collection of index funds and a small commercial real estate holding he had purchased in 2003 and paid off entirely. When everything was calculated and the taxes were settled, his estate came to just over $1.9 million, and he had left it entirely to me. I sat in the attorney's office on a Tuesday morning and stared at the number on the document until the digits stopped looking like real things. Then I drove home, made a pot of coffee, and sat at my kitchen table for the better part of 2 hours thinking about what to do next. The question that kept circling in my mind was not what to buy or where to invest. It was simpler and older than that. It was the question I had been carrying my whole life without ever saying it out loud. If I needed help, really needed it, who would actually show up? I had a theory about the answer. I just needed to test it before I did anything else. That Thursday night at 11:14, I pulled my car into a parking lot 2 miles from my apartment building and turned off the engine. I sat in the dark for a moment, rehearsing the message in my head. Then I opened my phone, dropped my live location pin into a group text, and sent the same message to my mother, my brother Caleb, my cousin Derek, and my coworker Danny. I wrote, "Hey, I'm so sorry to text this late. My car just died on me. I'm on the shoulder off exit 34 and I have no idea what's wrong. I'm a little scared. Is there anyone who can come get me? I'll pay for gas. I'm sending my location now." Then I sat very still and watched the responses come in. My mother replied in 4 minutes. She wrote, "Emma, it is almost midnight. Call AAA. You pay for that membership every year for exactly this reason. I have an early morning tomorrow." And then, as if she had thought of something else on her way back to whatever she was doing, she sent a second message. "Also, you should really look into getting a newer car." Caleb did not call. He sent a voice memo, which I knew, without listening to it, would be less than 15 seconds long. I played it anyway. He said, and I am summarizing, that he had an early gym session, and that calling a tow truck was genuinely not that complicated, and I was an adult. Derek left me on read. I watched the 3 gray dots appear under Danny's name before any message came through. Then my phone rang. Not a text. A call. Emma. Her voice was immediate and slightly out of breath, like she had just stood up fast. "Where exactly are you? Exit 34 off which highway? I need the full address if you have it, or I can just follow your PIN." I had known Danny for 2 years. We worked at the same outpatient clinic. She was a physical therapy aide, which meant she did a significant portion of the hands-on work for significantly less pay than I received. She drove a 2009 Civic with a cracked passenger mirror. She sent money home to her mother in Ohio every month. And I knew this only because she had mentioned it once in passing, and then immediately changed the subject. "Danny," I said, and my voice did something I was not entirely prepared for. It cracked, just slightly. "You really do not have to come. It is late." "Tell me the highway," she said. I gave her the cross street closest to the parking lot and told her I was on the shoulder. I could hear her grabbing her keys before I finished the sentence. She arrived 41 minutes later. She pulled up behind my car with her hazard lights blinking and got out wearing her work hoodie and the old sneakers she always had at her desk. She knocked on my window, and when I rolled it down, the first thing she said was, "Are you okay? Did anyone stop? Were you by yourself this whole time?" I told her I was fine. I told her I had figured out the car issue while I was waiting, which was technically true since there was never actually an issue, and that I could drive it after all. But that I was still really shaken up and I was so sorry she had come all this way. She looked at me for a long moment. "Don't apologize," she said. "That's what people are for." I drove home that night with my hands steady on the wheel and my chest feeling like something heavy had been set down inside it. I knew what I needed to know. I had known it before I sent the text, if I was being honest with myself. But there is a difference between suspecting something and watching it confirmed in real time. The following week, I called the estate attorney and officially began the process of claiming my uncle's inheritance. I set up an LLC, hired a financial advisor, my attorney recommended, and moved the funds into a secure account under the company name Meridian Clarity Holdings. Then I quietly hired a forensic accountant, because there was one more thing I needed to understand before the real confrontation began. Uncle Richard had owned more than investment funds. He had also owned a small but profitable specialty print shop that my mother and Caleb had been managing informally since his death. It was called Hartwell Print and Design, and it had been in our extended family for almost 20 years. Uncle Richard had named me as the sole heir to the business in his will, along with everything else, but because I lived 40 minutes away and had a full-time career, I had agreed, without any formal arrangement, to let my mother and Caleb handle the day-to-day operations. While the estate was being settled, I sent a message every few weeks asking for updates. The updates were always vague. The business was fine. Things were steady. No major news. What the forensic accountant found in 12 days of document review told a very different story. Caleb had been drawing a salary from the business account for 11 months, a salary he had never discussed with me and that bore no relationship to any work he had documented performing. My mother had authorized 3 consulting fee payments to herself, totaling just under $40,000. The business vendor contracts had been renegotiated, quietly, with a company my accountant traced back to a limited liability corporation with Caleb's home address on file. The print shop was still profitable, barely, but it had been quietly bled while I was trusting people not to bleed it. There was also, tucked into the back of the financial records, a document my accountant flagged immediately. It was a draft of a business transfer agreement, prepared by an attorney I had never heard of, that would convert full ownership of Hartwell Print and Design from my name to a joint ownership structure split between my mother and my brother. The document had been drawn up 2 months earlier. No one had mentioned it to me. I sat with all of this information for 3 days. I let it settle. Then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my attorney. The second was to Danny. I want to be clear about why I called Danny. It was not because I needed emotional support, though I did. It was because she had showed up on a cold Thursday night with her hazard lights on and her old sneakers on and asked if I was okay before she asked anything else. And I had been carrying the weight of what I had discovered alone for 3 days, and I needed to say it out loud to someone I trusted. I told her everything. The inheritance, the test, what the accountant had found, the draft transfer document. There was a long pause on her end of the line. Then she said, "Emma, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to let them think it's still working," I said. "And then I'm going to show them that it isn't." My mother hosted a Christmas dinner every year at her house. It was the kind of gathering that was more performance than meal. With the good china and the candles in the silver holders and the strict seating arrangement that always placed me at the far end of the table nearest the kitchen, which was not a coincidence. I arrived on time. I wore a plain wool sweater and my old coat. I brought a bottle of wine that cost $12 because that was what I always brought and I did not want anything about me to look different yet. My sister-in-law was in the kitchen when I came through the side door. Her name is Bree, and she had been married to my brother for 6 years. She was finishing the last of the side dishes, stirring something on the stove with one hand and holding a dish towel with the other. And she was the only person in that kitchen who was actually doing any work. She looked up when she heard me and gave me a real smile, the tired kind that means someone is genuinely glad to see another real person. "You're here," she said. "Help me with these rolls?" I took off my coat and helped with the rolls. We talked in low voices while the oven timer counted down. Bree told me, quietly, that Caleb had spent most of the afternoon on his phone and had not offered to help once. She told me that she had asked him the week before about some financial pressure she was feeling, that their savings had been lower than she expected, and that he had told her things were fine and changed the subject. I did not tell her what I knew, not yet. I just listened and kept helping with the rolls. Dinner was the kind of meal that looks warm and abundant from a distance. Up close, the dynamics were sharp-edged. My mother sat at the head of the table and directed the conversation with the precision of someone who had rehearsed it. Caleb talked about a business opportunity he was pursuing, something vague involving a real estate partnership, and my mother nodded along with the specific kind of enthusiasm she reserved exclusively for him. I was asked twice if I had considered moving closer, both times in a tone that made clear the correct answer was yes. After the main course, before the dessert, my mother reached under the tablecloth and produced a manila folder. She placed it on the table next to the gravy boat with the practiced casualness of someone who had been planning this moment for weeks. "Since we're all together," she said, "I think it's a good time to talk about the shop." I kept my expression neutral and reached for my water glass. Caleb leaned forward. He had a particular way of explaining things, very measured, very authoritative, designed to make it clear that he understood the situation better than whoever he was talking to. He explained, in this tone, that the print shop had been a challenge to manage, that the market was shifting, that the overhead was significant, and that the most practical solution for everyone, himself included, was to formalize the arrangement that was already informally in place. The document my mother had just placed on the table was, he said, a straightforward transfer of operational ownership that would protect the business going forward. "We've had an attorney look at it," my mother added, and she slid the folder toward me. "It's all very clean, Emma. It just puts things in writing." I picked up the folder. I opened it slowly and looked at the first page. It was a version of the same transfer agreement my forensic accountant had flagged 2 months ago, now printed on heavier paper with an attorney's letterhead at the top. In exchange for transferring full ownership of Hartwell Print and Design, I would receive a one-time payment of $15,000. The business, according to the accountant I had hired, was currently valued at just over $300,000 and had consistent annual revenue. I set the folder down gently on the table in front of me. "What happens to Bree's name on this?" I asked. Not because her name was on it. It wasn't. But I wanted to watch Caleb's face when someone mentioned her. He blinked. "This is a business document. It doesn't involve Bree." Bree was looking at the folder from her seat with an expression she was working very hard to keep composed. "Does Bree know about the consulting fees?" I asked. The table went quiet in a way that had texture to it. "What consulting fees?" Bree said. It was not a question. My mother cleared her throat. "Emma, this isn't the time for the $40,000 in consulting fees paid to your personal account over the past 11 months, I said to my mother, keeping my voice exactly even, or the vendor contracts renegotiated with an LLC registered to Caleb's home address, or the salary Caleb has been drawing from the business since February without my knowledge or consent, given that I am the legal sole owner of the business." Caleb stood up. He did not do it dramatically. He just stood, like he was preparing to leave the room, and I understood immediately that he thought standing up gave him the advantage in the conversation. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said. "Managing that shop has been a full-time burden on top of everything else I do, and if anyone was compensated for that work, it was well earned." "Compensated without authorization from the legal owner," I said, "which is not compensation. It has another name. Emma." My mother's voice had dropped to the register she used when she wanted me to understand that I was causing a scene. "You are being completely irrational. We have kept that business running for over a year while you couldn't be bothered to be involved. This document is fair. $15,000 for a business worth $300,000 is not fair," I said. "But I appreciate you confirming that you know what it's worth." Caleb pointed at me across the table. "Sign the document, Emma. This is not a negotiation. You don't have the resources or the time to manage that shop yourself, and you know it. Take the money and let people who actually know what they're doing handle it. Bree was very still in her chair. She was looking at Caleb with an expression I recognized from my own face on bad days. It was the look of someone doing arithmetic in their head and not liking the answer. I looked at the folder one more time. Then I closed it and slid it back toward the center of the table. I'm not signing anything tonight, I said. And I want to tell you why. Neither of them spoke. My mother had picked up her wine glass and was holding it without drinking from it. I'm going to be honest with you, I said. I have known about the financial irregularities in the shop's accounts for several weeks. I hired a forensic accountant the same week I hired a business attorney, which I did the same week I finished the process of claiming Uncle Richard's full estate. Caleb crossed his arms. Richard's estate was mostly tied up in funds. There's nothing there that changes anything. I reached into my coat pocket. I had folded a single piece of paper there before I arrived, and I unfolded it now and placed it on the table. It was a summary statement from my LLC account, printed that morning, showing a verified balance. My mother leaned forward to read the number. The wine glass in her hand tipped slightly, and she caught it. Caleb stared at the paper without picking it up. Uncle Richard was a more careful investor than any of us knew, I said. The estate, including the business, came to just over $1.9 million. I have been managing it through a holding company for the past several months. I also closed a separate financial arrangement last week that added to that total. I paused. I am not, as it turns out, someone who needs $15,000 and a pat on the head to make a problem go away. Bree exhaled slowly through her nose. I looked at her and she looked at me, and something passed between us that was neither of our doing and both of ours at once. That money, my mother said, and her voice had changed into something thinner, should be shared. Richard was family. He would have wanted all of us to benefit. Uncle Richard made a will, I said. He had access to every member of this family for decades. He knew everyone at this table. He made a choice about where his estate would go, and he documented it legally. I think we should respect that. Emma. Caleb's voice had shifted too. He had dropped the authoritative register and something more careful had replaced it. Look, whatever the accountant told you, there were expenses. There was overhead. There were months where I was essentially working for free to keep that place running. We can work this out. We don't need to involve attorneys. Let's just talk like a family. I'm happy to talk like a family, I said. As soon as you return the money that was taken without authorization, all of it, including the consulting fees and the vendor contract overcharges. You are out of your mind, Caleb said, and now the careful tone was gone entirely. Then we'll let the attorneys sort out who's right, I said pleasantly. What happened over the next 20 minutes I will describe without much embellishment because the facts are sufficient. My mother cried. She did not cry because she was sorry. She cried because the strategy she had relied on throughout my entire life, which was to make me feel guilty for asserting myself, had always worked before, and now suddenly it wasn't working, and she did not have another one ready. She said things about ingratitude and about how everything she had ever done was for the good of this family, and about how Uncle Richard would be heartbroken to see me using his money to tear us apart. Caleb did not cry. He argued, and then he threatened, and then he argued again. And eventually he arrived at negotiating, which told me everything I needed to know about his actual position. Bree sat quietly through all of it, with her hands in her lap. When there was a pause, she asked Caleb, very quietly, what an LLC registered to his home address was doing in the shop's vendor contracts. He told her that wasn't the point. She asked him again. He told her she didn't understand business. She stood up from the table and walked into the kitchen, and did not come back. I found her there after I had concluded what needed to be concluded at the dinner table. She was standing at the counter with a glass of water, looking out the small window above the sink at the dark backyard. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be, she said. I've been asking questions for a long time and getting answers that didn't add up. I think I needed someone else to ask them out loud. I told her what I should have told her weeks earlier. I told her that I had a family law attorney I had already consulted about a parallel matter, and that if she ever needed a referral for her own situation, I could make that call. I told her she did not have to make any decisions tonight or this week or any particular time at all. She nodded slowly and kept looking out the window. Then she turned and looked at me with the direct, steady gaze of someone who has recently rearranged something important inside themselves. "What are you going to do with the shop?" she asked. "Keep it," I said. "Hire someone good to run it. Make sure the people who actually work there are being paid correctly." She almost smiled. "Good," she said. The following Monday, I drove to the clinic before my first patient arrived and knocked on the break room door where I knew Danny would be eating her breakfast. She looked up from her container of oatmeal and read something in my face. "How did it go?" she asked. "Exactly like I expected," I said, "but differently than I feared." I sat down across from her and put an envelope on the table between us. She looked at it and then looked at me. "Emma, open it," I said. She opened it slowly, the way people open things when they are already bracing for something. Inside was a letter from my attorney and a folded financial document. The document established a restricted educational fund in Danny's name, seeded with $50,000, to be used for tuition and associated costs if she chose to pursue her physical therapy license. The letter explained the terms. The money was hers regardless of whether she used it for school. It was structured so that no one could contest it and it could not be taken away. Danny read it twice. She set it down on the table and looked at the wall for a moment. "This is because of the night I came to get you," she said. "It's because you answered the phone," I said. "And because you asked if I was okay before you asked anything else. And because you drove 41 minutes in the dark to a parking lot off exit 34 without knowing how long you'd be there or what you'd find when you got there. You did that on a Thursday night when you had work the next morning and you were tired and it wasn't convenient and you came anyway." She pressed her lips together and looked down at the document. "I just came to help," she said. "That's not extraordinary." "It is," I said. "You just don't know it because you're the kind of person who shows up, and you've always been that kind of person. So it feels ordinary to you. It is not ordinary. I want you to know that it is not ordinary." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You didn't actually break down, did you?" It was not quite a question. "No," I said. She nodded once, slowly, and I saw the picture reassemble itself in her mind in real time. Then she looked at me with an expression that was not hurt, and was not angry, and was, if anything, the kind of understanding that comes from having quietly suspected something true for a while. "Okay," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you before," I said. "Stop apologizing," she said. "That's what people are for." She smiled when she said it this time, and it landed differently than it had the first time, warmer and more specific, like an inside joke between two people who had just decided they were friends. The situation with the business and my family took several more months to resolve fully. The financial irregularities were documented and a repayment demand was sent through my attorney. My brother and mother hired their own attorneys. The back and forth was tedious and expensive for them and less so for me, and ultimately an agreement was reached that returned to me what had been taken, plus the cost of the forensic accounting. The draft transfer agreement was never mentioned again. Bree filed for divorce in March. I did make that referral. Her attorney was thorough and her settlement was fair. Uncle Richard's print shop is still operating. I hired a general manager with 20 years of industry experience and a reputation for treating staff well. Revenue is up from where it was when my family was running it. The people who work there have health insurance now, which they did not have before. I did not cut off my mother or my brother. That was a deliberate choice and not an easy one. What I did was change the terms. I stopped apologizing for asserting myself. I stopped shrinking into the seat at the far end of the table. I stopped waiting to be seen by people who had decided what they were looking at before I walked through the door. The relationship we have now is quiet and managed and honest, in the way that relationships sometimes are when all the performance has been stripped away and what is left is what is actually there. What I kept thinking about in the months that followed was something Danny said the night I told her about the inheritance, before any of the rest of it had happened. I had told her about Uncle Richard, about the cards with the handwritten notes, about him driving 3 hours to see me graduate. I told her he had been more consistent than anyone else in my life, and I had not fully understood what a gift that was until it was gone. Danny was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He taught you what to look for." I think she was right. I think that is what he left me, in addition to everything else. The number in the bank account was a tool. The clarity was the inheritance. People talk about family like it is a fixed thing, a category you are born into, that defines the terms of who owes what to whom. I believed that for a long time. I believed it even when the evidence kept suggesting otherwise. It took a cold Thursday night in a parking lot and a woman driving 41 minutes with her hazard lights on to make me understand what I think I had known somewhere beneath the surface for years. The people who show up are your family. The rest is just paperwork. If you have ever had someone outside your bloodline show up for you in a way your actual relatives never did, I want to hear about it. Leave it in the comments below. And if this story meant something to you, please subscribe. We put out new stories every week, and every single one of them is about people choosing each other on purpose.